All right. Well, thanks so much for coming to our session, last session of the day before our happy hour in the atrium. So we will be talking today about engaging your community using social media. So my name is Shelby Wright, and I am the manager of engagement for Casella Waste Systems for the Eastern region. So I do a lot of education and outreach and public affairs work, as well as government relations. And one of the things that's always popular is letting people know what you're doing and letting them participate in what you're doing, and also letting them talk about what you're doing for you, because it's the best kind of promotion that you could ever have. So today we are joined by a couple of experts in social media and promotion. First, I'm going to introduce Daniel Saloman. Daniel, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, we'll do this during our presentation, but I am coming here with two students of mine. I am an educator at Camden Hills Regional High School, so we came here from Rockport, Maine.
And next up is Kate Belinsky.
Hey, I'm Kate Belinsky. I run a marketing agency, and I've worked with Shelby on the Maine Recycles Week campaign, and I'll be talking to you about social media and how you can engage your community in order to get your message out.
All right, well, folks, is there anything in particular that anyone would like to learn today that they feel like they came in the room to learn? So we kind of have one key takeaway for everybody. Yes. Reach a wide, that's hard. It's hard to say. Reach a wider audience. Okay, so there you go. There's your takeaway.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. Okay. So transforming waste to resources is one of Sweetwater Foundation's taglines. And so all of these projects that we did for farming, for the carpentry apprenticeship program, even renovations for old houses, we did sourcing materials from the region's waste stream, from the city's waste stream. So we would often get pallets that were delivering like expensive glass downtown for like high-rise luxury apartment buildings, sometimes from museums and other art installations, taking those materials apart, making that part of the practice, and then giving them new life. There's just a few examples of that in the carpentry apprenticeship program, which we did in this basically greenhouse space, bringing a little bit of my architectural design work to the table, rethinking how this space could function. We just used what materials that we had to build new tables with our crew and create some organization, some storage systems outside where we would sometimes just throw the materials against the wall. We decided we wanted to create a little bit of a wood rack. Again, this was all just reclaimed, repurposed materials being diverted from the landfill. We also had a bunch of different furniture projects, which I've adopted at the hatchery. So they'll be talking about that a little bit. But this is one of them. This is called a fractal, a bunch of jigs that we would build to make the system really sort of streamlined. We had all these fractals, which were crates, seats. We could use them for harvesting on the farm. But a really brilliant part of this project is that all of the cutoffs from larger projects that we did could become stock for these fractals. So that was sort of the design intention. It was designed around the building projects that we normally did. And this was a really common site in the area. There's a ton of vacancy on the south side. It's a huge problem. And this is the reason for it. There's a lot of fast track demolition that happened on the south side of Chicago, the mayor calling for these buildings to get demolished. But in a disinvested neighborhood, you end up with a lot of vacancy and not a lot of redevelopment. And so thinking differently about that, this is what the neighborhood used to look like. This is what it looks like now. You can see how vacant it became before Sweetwater stepped in 2012. We decided to create this whole structure, and everything that you see in this image, again, using materials that were coming from crates and all these other waste streams. So this was our Friday market. So we would harvest things from the farm. We would have craft sales. This was during the pandemic. We had a local chef do a cooking demonstration, live streamed in this space. Speaking of community outreach, other community engagements. So then I moved to Maine, came to the high school to launch this program, which is operating out of the old industrial art space. And this is what I arrived to, what looked like a huge mess. But I was able to sort of see through that, see the potential. This is outside the space of all this material. bringing the ethos of transforming waste to resources, rebranding it as radical reuse, which we'll speak about now. We thought we would start with pallets. It's a really ubiquitous material. You can find pallets anywhere. There's a lot that get retired that end up in the landfill. So why not start there? To introduce myself and to sort of launch the hatchery program in the first week of school, I made an announcement to the whole school that we'd be doing a pallet deconstruction party called Pallet Palooza. We were playing dismantling or like protest music the whole time. Students were able to take their masks off outside so they could breathe fresh air, get some exercise, get to know each other. And that is where I will hand it off to some of my hatchery apprentices. So these two students have joined me in launching the hatchery. It is a very collective effort to make this program work. Not me, it's really everyone, which you'll see in a moment. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to our first student presenter, Quinn.
Hi, I'm Quinn Reardon. I'm a sophomore at Camden Hills. That's me on the left there playing with some plastic. And yeah, so as Mr. Saloman said, this is my first year in the hatchery. This is the first year the hatchery has really been up and running, and it's completely changed my perspective on high school and community involvement and kind of how I want to pursue my passion. So coming into this year, I was kind of drawn down to the hatchery by this whole Pallet Palooza thing that Mr. Saloman organized, kind of behind that with the idea that pallets are these ubiquitous resources that are wasted and used all over the place. And so deconstructing them was a really good way to get stock materials for us to start off the year. So there's me deconstructing some pallets. And yeah, this was a super communal thing in our school. We were able to bring a bunch of kids down and just using simple tools and kind of teamwork, deconstruct tons of pallets. We got tons of kids involved, and it was just a super powerful thing, a super good way to start off the year and get the community involved and kind of kick off the hatchery. So, and it also kind of goes to show how deconstructing things can be a really good way to use resources and divert from waste. So all these pallets, which could have otherwise gotten thrown away, we were able to completely deconstruct and turn into stock materials. And teamwork was a super big part of this. I know a lot of people got super involved and had a lot of fun with their friends, just coming down during study halls, being able to take off their masks and deconstruct these pallets. So we also made sure we collected all of the old nails, and it's kind of a testament to all the hard work that we put in to deconstruct the pallets and get that stock for the beginning of the year. So one thing that Mr. Saloman has preached all of this year, but especially in my little hatchery group, is this idea of flow. And the concepts behind flow kind of break up into three parts, which is routine, ritual, and reflection. And these kind of come in a full circle together. So one of the things that we reflected on with Pallet Palooza was the amount of pallets that are in the world, and which is almost 2 billion, and the amount that are retired each year, which is 400 million, which means that about that number of new pallets are produced. And a lot of these retired old wood pallets aren't really used for anything. This is a huge amount of resources. So if you kind of conceptualize this 400 million pallets and you stack that to the height of the Empire State Building, it would be over 75 Empire State Buildings worth of retired materials each year that could be used for pretty much any sort of project. So another more local example of that is that if you laid all these pallets down flat, it would cover all of Kennebec County. And then also we strove to get more reused materials. So we were able to get degrade lumber from Viking Lumber locally, and this was about $4,000 worth of lumber, which is a huge amount, especially considering that this program was new and we might not, or other schools who would be starting programs like this might not have a ton of resources. So we got this wood, we unloaded off the truck, and we started to conceptualize this kind of like the pallets with the amount of resources that this is compared to, per se, a dumpster, and how we're going to use these resources kind of instead of putting them in the trash, taking them out and reusing them for better purposes for education and community outreach. So using those materials that we gathered at the beginning of the year, Mr. Saloman introduced us to the carpentry projects, which he transferred over from Sweetwater Foundation. And in the hatchery, we use these projects as educational experiences. And we also use them to learn design and sketches and how to come together. It was a super good experience. And we were able to, again, take our masks off and get outside and be creative, building and assembling these different carpentry projects. And we also explored computer design and how to use computer design to maybe speed up the production process and learn about how things are assembled or how they can be disassembled. More pictures of that. So yeah, also, once we finished these projects, we were able to expand them out into the school community. And as you can see here, there's classes that were out and using them. And it was super powerful to see how our work could actually be used. Resources that were coming from what might have been considered like trash or retired resources were then able to be used again in our community outreach. And then, so that was mostly focused with the degrade lumber that we got from Viking Lumber. And then we started thinking about how we could also reuse the pallets. So using the kind of deconstructing the pallets conceptually and then using the narrow decking boards in our school community, we figured that this kind of throwing a design together, we were able to turn these wood pallets into components for food pantry shelving in our school community. So in our school thrift store and food pantry, there was need for more shelving and more space for food. And so we kind of undertook this using the pallets and the degrade lumber, and we were able to create shelving, which was going to be used to help out our community and some of the less fortunate components of that community. So we were able to assemble all of these and finish them and bring them up to the food pantry. And it was a super powerful group for the hatchery project for the hatchery because it really brought the hatchery group together. So this was one of the first projects where we were all kind of intertwined, and it was just super powerful to be able to help out with the community in general and the food pantry and create this shelving that is going to be super helpful. And there's us installing it. And then my friend and fellow student Avery Hackett is going to talk about his experience in the hatchery this year as well. So hello, I am Avery Hackett. I'm a junior at Camden Hills Regional High School. And through my high school experience, I've kind of been increasing in the amount of extracurricular activities in the school that are environmentally based, like the wind planners group that I'm talking about, which is just an environmental group with the school. And reuse and sustainability have always been kind of a background interest and concern for me, but because of my new involvement in the hatchery, I've kind of come to the foreground of my thinking. I got involved with the hatchery at the beginning of the second semester of this school year through working with Habitat for Humanity, seeing a couple of the projects that we had worked on and how much waste was involved with them, even though it's a very positive project, as well as positive influences such as Quinn and Thorne, another friend of mine, that kind of pulled me towards the hatchery cause. Within a couple of weeks of joining the hatchery, I saw all of my school projects centralized in the hatchery. All of the projects I've been working on, such as compost and prom and wind planners and other clubs, all culminate within the hatchery because of all the work that we have been doing with the hatchery. And now sort of every day I think about different ways I can use the idea of reuse in all the projects that I do in school and outside. Because I joined the hatchery in the second semester, I still needed to learn all the skills that the other apprentices in the hatchery had learned at the beginning of the school year. And an easy way to do this was by using the cutoffs that Quinn's Furniture Building had produced from their learning of the skills as well as making the furniture. And we were able to use these cutoffs to make new connections in the community by building chairs for an outdoor learning space at the elementary school. And if you don't know, the elementary school is right in our backyard at the high school. So we're able to walk down and
talk to all these little kids and measure their bodies to figure out how big these chairs need to be and measure their tables. Which we then brought back to the hatchery and scaled down all of the designs that Quinn's team had made earlier in the year, and then made models and cut lists based on these designs. And then we're able to learn a modeling program called SketchUp, and then move to using the cutoffs to actually build a couple of these different varieties of chairs and tables. And then eventually we tested them out here, very small. And we actually built it so that it fit inside of the larger sliced bench, just for storage uses. And then we trucked them over to the elementary school and talked to them about how we made them and our process. Here's us kind of interacting with them. And then we actually brought over a couple of the spare pieces and built some of the last mini slice benches and interlocking ponies with them. And applied some healthy sealer to the outside with them. And this is really neat because it was both of these groups benefited in this experience. They were able to gain a couple of great chairs they were able to use for a long time. And we learned how to make these things in within a couple of weeks of joining the program, which I think was really neat. And kind of longer lasting effect, because I come back to the community 5 or 10 years, I'll see these chairs that all these years of elementary and school kids have used. Feel really important and powerful. Also, while Quinn's kind of project was within the school community, so once they built the chairs, it was for within the school. This was kind of more for the community, so it was like reaching out farther, reach for our community. Another unused part of the pallets were the stringers, which that coupled with the excess skis from our local ski sale swap, we were able to come up with this idea to make Adirondack ski chairs, or Adirondack chairs. And in the past, there have been designs using reused wood for Adirondack chairs, as well as secondhand skis to make Adirondack chairs, but never both reused wood and secondhand skis. So it's kind of a hybrid of both, and it's a new idea. Also, there were a couple different classes that were working on these together in conjunction, but never kind of communicating together. So a common language that we were able to use was a cut list for being able to build all these chairs together while completely doing everything at different times of the day. Yeah, so this lesson plan can also be used in future years because there's kind of always a constant stream of excess skis from this detail, as well as the wood. So it can be kind of a constant revenue system for the program because of we can sell the chairs to the community, which has actually been very popular with the chairs. And so both of these projects made me feel or made me think much more deeply about reuse within the community and on so many levels it can be so beneficial. Like economically, these were essentially free for us to build, and we were able to gain a profit out of it, as well as a learning experience for us to actually build these and learn how to ski in half and use an impact driver, all these sweet tools that I had really never been introduced to until the beginning of this project. Now I'm going to hand back to Quinn.
Another important thing that kind of we learned in the hatchery this year alongside reusing materials was thinking about waste streams and where materials are coming from, but also where they're going. So as Avery mentioned earlier, he and I are both in the Habitat for Humanity, and in our towns and surrounding towns, there's a Christmas parade every year. So Habitat this year came up with the idea to learn about framing houses, and we decided to make a house frame to go on a parade float. So we built this and kind of in the hatchery, we worked on this and assembled it and then put Christmas decorations on it. And we're able to take it out to the parades. And it was a super big hit. People really liked it in the community. And then afterwards, we were kind of faced with this idea of, okay, now we've built this thing for the specific purpose, the specific event. And now what are we going to do with these materials? And so we kind of answered that question through the CTE program at our school. And they were challenged with deconstructing this thing because at the end of this year, they have a similar house framing project to this. And so they need to learn how, the frames of houses work, and deconstructing this can be just as good of a learning tool as constructing a new one. So in just 20 minutes, they were able to completely deconstruct these materials. And as it broke down, we had, again, these cutoffs that we could then use for further projects. So that was a super powerful example in our school of how maybe a one-time event would cause the need for resources. And then after using those resources for that event, that can be deconstructed down and those materials can be reused. So another example of that I worked on a lot at the end of this year were the cafeteria booths that were retired at our school, because as you can see, CDC guidelines, only one person was allowed to sit at each booth, and there wasn't enough room for all of those booths in the cafeteria, so they had to go. And after the schools kind of tried to get rid of them or send them to Habitat or some other restores, the hatchery was kind of challenged with and accepted to take them. And so we deconstructed them and started to consider the different materials that we had here and what we were going to be able to do with them. And unlike a lot of the other reuse projects that we did this year, these were really odd shapes and different materials, composite wood and metals. So in the process of deconstructing, we were able to culminate our ideas and think about what we really wanted to do with these materials. And my subgroup in my hatchery apprenticeship program looked at the curve of the lunch booths, and we kind of had a common interest of bikes. And we decided, this was kind of a key moment here, Ian, thinking about the shape. And we decided that we were going to make bike racks out of them. And so after a pretty extensive debate, we decided on upcycle bicycle racks and spent a bunch of time designing these and figuring out how they would work, testing out different prototypes and testing out bikes on them. And we finally came to a pretty awesome product that satisfied a lot of our needs and also was using reused materials that had once been cafeteria booths, which is super powerful to see. And we were actually able to, another important part of this was learning about kind of how construction happens and how things are often quickly made with sleds and jigs and other such things like that. And so that sped up our construction process a lot and allowed us to gain a knowledge about that. And then after we constructed these, we were able to bring them to an event at CMCA and kind of display them off to the community. And there was a bunch of interest in them. So we're looking forward to being able to explore that and get the bike racks out into the community. And we finished them up and we're pretty much ready to send those off. So we have interest in those. And then another part of the booths were the curved composite seat parts. And so the other section of my hatchery group came up with the Booth to Bloom vertical garden idea. And so kind of building a structure out of the reused wood and then taking the shape and constructing these like little flower gardens. So that was how we figured that we would be able to reuse those materials. And then the final component of those booths were the metal legs. And so with help of the CTE program, we were able to turn these into a lumber rack where we would be able to display our work and all the lumber that we've acquired through reuse that we will then be able to use for future projects moving forward.
All right, so another piece of another time of reuse or deconstruction was during break. Mr. Saloman deconstructed an old house and actually was able to take from a friend and was able to take a bunch of the lath in the old house back to the school. Here's all the lath that was able to be gained from the house, which would have just been thrown away. And with the help of a bunch of students, we were able to denail all the lath and have a ton of wood for any projects that we would need. One being the compost system at our school. Quinn and I are on the compost team, and we saw many problems, as you can see, at the beginning of the school year with the compost. And Thorne Beckstrom, one very devoted member of the team, designed and constructed and built all new models from both D-grade lumber as well as a ton of the lath that was gained from the deconstruction. So yeah, he was key in painting, building, designing, collaborating, teaching the whole new system that is now in place at our school, and it's been in use now for 2 or 3 weeks, and it's been a huge hit. It works very well, and we went from 12 bags of trash to 2 in a lunch period. It's tremendous. Yeah. So, and it's neat that waste receptacles were made from waste. So it's kind of a dual. And so also a thing that I'm working on, I'm the vice president for my class, and it's kind of turned into me being the prom construction manager. So, and prom is a great event, and it hasn't happened in our school in 2 years. But the biggest problem with prom is the waste. So everything that you buy for a one-time thing that just gets thrown away. And so me being a part of the hatchery, we discussed and we figured out that, oh, well, we can just build everything that we need and take it apart when we're done with it. And so the theme of our prom is the medieval masquerade. So as you can see, we wanted to build a chandelier, and we didn't want to buy a chandelier for $700. So we actually were very lucky that we had this cap from an old photography darkroom that Mr. Saloman saved. It was moments away from getting thrown in a dumpster, and Mr. Saloman was like, wait, we can use this for something. So we finally found a use for it, and by using math to figure out the center of the circle, and we painted it. We have begun work on this chandelier, and we're halfway done with it. Prom isn't for a few more weeks, so we have more time to put candles and chains on it. We also wanted to build thrones for the prom, 2 thrones. Again, instead of paying $300+ for building chairs, having chairs, we decided to build them. We figured out how tall we would be, or how the ergonomics of the chair would be, and then scaled it up because we wanted a very large looking throne. And we designed the components on the computer using SketchUp again, and then began construction on thrones, and we've finished the bottom 2 sections of it. And then we also we're planning on building, there are the 2 bottom sections of the throne. We also are planning on building a castle, and so we started by looking at pictures online. We sketched a couple drawings of the pictures. Basically, that the prom coordinator talked to her about how big we wanted it to be. We mapped it out on the gym floor. We modeled it online. Figured out some architectural things such as buttresses. I didn't know what buttresses meant. Just on the light that meant. And so, but the biggest thing about finishing the thrones and beginning work on the castle is that we needed to know how much material that we needed, because we didn't quite have enough material to build this, and we didn't want to just go buy any material. So we embarked on 2 different deck deconstruction connections, I guess, where we went this took just one morning on the weekend, and with a bunch of kids, and we all deconstructed the deck from someone who reached out saying we don't want to pay a contractor to take apart this deck and then throw all the materials away. So we did it for free, and we're able to gain all of these materials. And here here's all the lumber that we were able to gain from that. And then also here, the dotted area, they wanted to match the color scheme. So they were taking apart all this lumber that they were just going to throw away. So we were able to intercept that and take that as well. This is all the lumber that we were able to gain through helping people deconstruct and just communicating with people and with what we were planning on doing. And so, though we're not finished with building all of this for prom, it hopefully can be a new norm for the prom planners in the future to go through a similar process of what we went through, because and all the ways that I described it, it's much more beneficial for us in the community and the environment. And we're already thinking about projects that we can use with these materials after we have deconstructed them from prom. So we're thinking many steps ahead and reducing in massive reduction in the purchasing and shipping and waste of all of these.
All right, so I'm going to conclude our presentation by talking a little bit about deconstruction outside of the context of the hatchery. So maybe you all, I'm sure this crowd is familiar with deconstruction ordinances. This is something that's been happening more recently. I mean, if you're not, I'll explain a little bit about that. But we've been basically piloting what it would mean if we thought differently about demolition. Between the deck deconstruction projects, sourcing materials this was from Rockland. They were fixing glass on the Atlantic Bakery. I asked them what they were doing with the framing lumber afterwards. They said, we don't know. I was able to get that. Pulling stuff out of dumpsters on the fly, even from our old middle school where they're doing some renovations, pulling wood out. And through the community outreach that we've done from the CMCA event that we did and the teachers that reached out saying, we have materials, the decking materials for you. Parents have also heard about it. They're reaching out about materials. So we hosted this event at the school, the first event on radical reuse back in October, to get this word out about the community. Students, took all their projects. We made T-shirts. I'm wearing one of them, using shirts from Goodwill that were going to get turned into rags to screen print on and resell. Again, waste to resource. Students teaching other community members the projects that they learned, selling the T-shirts, getting young folks involved. These were also cut-offs from other projects, the giant Jenga set. We had Tia Anderson, the director of Midcoast Habitat, come speak at the end. But most importantly, we had Sarah Badiali, who is a woman based in Portland, Oregon. She was instrumental in getting the first deconstruction ordinance passed in the entire world in the city of Portland. And so what this ordinance mandates is that houses and duplexes that were built originally the way it was passed was built before 1916 have to be deconstructed rather than demolished. There are penalties involved if you don't do that. And so, this was the first of its kind, and it's proven really successful. So successful that 2 years later, they amended it saying any houses or duplexes built before 1940 need to be deconstructed and not demolished. And since proving its success, other cities have started to adopt this policy. Pittsburgh, some cities in California, Denver. So it's spreading, and Sarah is actually in the middle of writing a playbook to share with other cities to spread this kind of policy. It's getting a lot of traction, and we had her speak, and she is now an ally. So what we'd like to leave you with is just the idea that reuse can be a way forward. There are policies that we can adopt here in Maine, maybe taken from Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine. Seems very feasible. And you can see recycling can be sort of a chore, but reuse can actually be a way of life. And we're all in this together. And so at the end of this event, we thought about what would it look like, created a sociogram map if a deconstruction ordinance were passed. And as you've seen, we sort of enacted that on a small scale in our area. So thank you so much for having us. And we also have little tokens for you to take. I'll leave these out on a table, just mementos. This is abandoned artwork from the school that we turned into little radical reuse postcards. So screen printed by students. So thank you again.
So I'm Kay Polinsky, and I'm going to be talking to you today about ways to use social media for community engagement. Going to be kind of hard to follow the boys that just presented because all of the projects that they're working on are really phenomenal. And I hope that they'll join us for Maine Recycles Week and share some of their stories as we work on that project a little bit more. But 97% of Fortune 500 companies rely on social media. So I was kind of hoping to gauge the room. How many people here does your company or your organization that you work for have a social media presence right now? Raise your hand. Okay, so almost everybody. And then do you personally have any input on that social media channel? Do you have access? Could you be posting and sharing on that? Raise your hand. Okay, great. So that's really good to know because that means that you're going to be able to use some of the things that you're going to learn here today on those social media channels. So social media for the longest time kind of had a little bit of a fluffy rep, right? It was a lot of pictures of people posting what they had for lunch or just sharing very personal things. But over time, it's changed and has really become something that businesses need and rely on in order to gain new customers and keep current customers coming back. So the average person spends about 144 minutes a day on social media. If you look at some of the age breakdowns on social media, it's not just younger generations. It kind of spans all ages. And obviously that varies a little bit by platform. And the likelihood that consumers would recommend a brand on social media is 71%. So it is really powerful in building authority and getting people to follow your message and gaining new eyes. So why is social media important? Obviously, it helps connect people. It makes it easier to share ideas. It allows us to have conversations on a wider range, and it helps build relationships and trust. Now, this said, depending on what your organization or business does, social media is not always like the end all be all for what you should be doing in your marketing mix. So you want to really evaluate whether you want to spend a lot of time on social media or just have it be something that supplements your overall marketing strategy. So whether you have current social media channels or you're starting up new social media channels, I wanted to kind of talk about the foundation that you should have before you really start shaking things up. So the first thing you want to do is choose the social media platforms that are right for you. So again, some of you may already have social media platforms that your business uses. And some of you may be thinking about whether or not you should jump on some other new channels that you might not have already. So the big thing that's important to remember is that until you feel like you're really mastering 2 or so channels, don't add other ones. It's better to have a concentrated effort on 1 or 2 channels than have, worry about creating content for multiple channels because it can kind of become a little bit overwhelming. The channel that you choose really depends on who it is that you're trying to reach, whether you do more consumer type sharing or whether you're trying to really share with businesses. So LinkedIn obviously is a really good one if you're trying to reach policymakers, other businesses, sponsors. Something like Facebook or Instagram would be really good for just general consumer audiences. You want to determine what your primary content pillars are. So a lot of people will start a social media channel and they'll just kind of start posting content here and there without really knowing what to post about. So determining your content pillars really is all about figuring out what it is that your audience cares about and what it is that your brand cares about. And usually it's good to narrow down anywhere between 4 to 6 content pillars. You don't want to have too many focuses. And what this will allow you to do is create content that is interesting, that appeals to your audience, and allows you to have some sort of content plan. That way you're not always wondering what it is you're going to be posting next. And when people ask, well, how do I come up with my content pillars? Or once I have my content pillars, how do I know what to post about? One of the things that I recommend doing is creating kind of a mind map. So I'm using this example of recycling because Shelby and I worked on Maine Recycles Week together. So if we were looking to think of what content we could post about recycling, we'd do a mind map. We'd want to talk about what recycling is, ways that you can recycle, why we recycle, and then you can see from those topics, it branches out a little bit more. And then we can talk about, using raw materials, why recycling is good for the environment. And then in ways we can recycle, this would be a really good opportunity to pull in some people like the, what was it? The radical reusers, right? Because that talks a little bit about recycling, it talks about reuse, but this is where we could sort of start framing our content strategy and knowing what we're going to talk about, and then being able to come up with community partners that we would later work with. So once you've got your content pillars and you've decided what channels you want to be on, you want to build out your social profile. So seems like most of you already have social profiles built out, or so it seems. What you should probably do is take a look and make sure that you have, your bio is filled out, that you're leading people to your website. If you're using links a lot, there's a lot of tools out there that you can use to make it easier on sites like Instagram. One of them is called Link in Bio. So if you're constantly posting stories or sharing stories and you can't really link in Instagram, that's a really great one that lets you then link through your bio to different stories, so you don't have to paste the link because then other people can't copy it and actually go to it. So you want to make sure that your profile is built out, that you've got a good amount of posts and content before you start sharing, with your friends or being really active on your social channels. That way, when somebody does come to your profile and they start looking, you've got content to kind of pull them in, rather than them coming, seeing that there's not much happening there, or your last post was, 2 years ago. And then they see it as not very active, and they'll leave, and you'll lose the opportunity to gain engagement or a follower. The big thing that I want to mention is a lot of people are very focused on what we call vanity metrics, and they can get very discouraged, especially when you're starting social media channels that are newer. So for example, Maine Recycles Week is a newer social media channel. It was built from the ground up. It's got 100 followers, which is not a ton of followers, right? We've got on Facebook more than that, but on Instagram, which was brand new, it's not that big. However, if you look at the posts and you look at the reach and the engagement on some of those posts, you'll see that even though there's 100 followers, we've reached, with one post, 1,700 almost people. So don't be discouraged because your following looks small. What you really want to focus on is reach and engagement. And I've worked with social media accounts like this one that are just starting out and are growing. And I've worked with social media accounts that have, 1 million followers, and social media accounts everywhere in between. And it doesn't matter how many followers you have if nobody's engaging with your content, and if it's not producing the result that you want, right? Like I've worked with businesses that do e-commerce and have large followings. They'll do posts and they won't really make many sales. And I've worked with smaller businesses who are maybe around 500 followers. They'll post something and they'll make several sales. So it really all depends on how engaged your audience is, and that's more important than some of the vanity follow metrics. So once your foundation is in place, what I really wanted to talk about was building some of that engagement, right? How do you increase your reach? And again, it's gonna, depending on what your business or organization is, some of these will apply, some of them won't. But I'm always happy to answer specific questions if you have them about your business. So one of them is holding a contest. So holding a contest is a really great way to boost your engagement. You can do a giveaway where, for example, those ski chairs that you built, fantastic thing to do a giveaway for, right? You can have people like, comment, share, and what this does is all of those likes, comments, and shares are what boosts your posts in the algorithm. I'm sure everybody's heard of the algorithms, right? They change all the time. They're difficult to keep up with, but the more engagement you can get, especially towards the beginning of posting, the more the algorithm will push your post. And then with something like a giveaway, you can take one piece of content and make it last a couple days, because when I share it the first day, Shelby might not see it till the second day, then she'll share it, and it kind of lets you extend content. And it also gets it in front of new eyes, because every time that somebody's tagged or somebody shares, you're exposing your post to an audience outside of your immediate network. If you're doing an event, you can always do some kind of contest where you say, take a photo and tag the business. So for example, with this conference, maybe there could have been a door prize at the happy hour. So anybody who during the event had taken a picture, posted it, tagged the event, would have been entered into a contest, and maybe they, got a prize at the end of happy hour. You can hold a caption this contest. So that's where you would post a photo. Usually it's a funny photo, a thought-provoking photo. It could even be, a photo of a pile of wood and asking people to caption it with what you think we could build with this. Or you can ask people to just share photos and videos about your company, about your brand, and then obviously have a contesting element to that where you give something away. Another way to build engagement is to do something weekly. So this is where you've probably heard of hashtags like, Throwback Thursday or Motivation Monday, things like that. And so using hashtags like that, or even making up your own, and then posting on a weekly basis, what that does is it conditions your audience to know that that content is coming up on a regular basis. People start to look forward to it, and people engage with it a little bit more. Another thing would be to create, a weekly tip series or a weekly, project reveal, something like that. As well as if you already have other content that's being created, like a blog or a podcast, share that once a week. And it doesn't have to be once a week, right? It could be every 2 weeks, but share it and keep it consistent. Having a schedule is really helpful in letting your audience know to look for you if for whatever reason they tend to miss the posts that you do that day. Another one is to feature staff and members of the community. Usually it's good to do this, once a month, twice a month. What it really does is allows you not only to highlight your staff and team members, but it builds that human element of it. I know that from the presentation before, the story of how, is it Dan? How Dan got to the program, got to where he is, and all the things that led to it. That's a fantastic story. That's things that people are going to remember. Those are the things that you want to highlight about your staff members or members of the community or people that you're collaborating with on projects, because those are the kind of stories that resonate. And then you can also, shout out people who have interacted with your content. Maybe they had valuable comments. Maybe they asked questions that you can address in an individual post. And by doing that, not only are you actively engaged with your audience, but that audience member is then more likely to continue following and engaging with you, because now you've kind of made them feel like they're part of your organization. Video trends are also a really good way to build engagement. Right now, pretty much every platform pushes video on the algorithm more than anything else. So doing as much video as possible is ideal. Everything from behind the scenes type video to videos where, you know, you can literally like hold the phone up like you're taking a selfie and do a video that way, talking about something that's happening in your company is really great. It helps put a face to the name. And at the end of the day, social media is all about making those connections and building those relationships. So the more that you can put your face out there, either on video or in posts, it tends to do better because that's how we tend to connect better. And even today, just looking out in the crowd and seeing everybody with masks on, right? It's not the same because you're not seeing everybody smile, you're not seeing people's reactions. And so in social media, the more you can show your face, the more people will be able to resonate with you. And then there's also video trends that are worth checking out and following. You probably heard about Reels. A lot of it is the silly song and dance, but there's also other trends that a lot of companies can use. And by jumping on those trends, you not only boost the algorithm because it's what's trending, but you also create content that's fun and that your audience could resonate with. And again, might be for some companies, might not be for your company. It depends on, you know, how corporate or how much fun you can have with your social media, right? Another thing that you can do is to ask questions or ask for feedback. So all of the posts that you do, whether they're videos, stories, should have some kind of call to action, right? Because if somebody reads your post or sees your story and that's how you end it, that's how you end it. But if you ask a question, if you encourage them to comment or you encourage them to share, people are more likely to then follow through on that. Obviously, you're not going to get 100% success rate, but you're going to get a better success rate than if you don't ask at all. So asking questions, you know, what do you think? Have you tried this? Or even just having people share their opinions on different things that you're working on is great. And then asking for feedback is also a really powerful way to not only build your engagement, but also learn more about your audience. A lot of companies use this for market research. So you could get feedback on things like events, maybe, you know, your company just changed procedures or a way that they do something and you want to know how the audience feels about it. You could ask that and get that insight. And then also just kind of taking a pulse on what's happening with current events, any kind of trends in your industry, getting a feel for that from your audience could give you valuable insight on ways that you either market your products or how you do business in general. There's been entire companies who change the way that their businesses operate based on feedback that they've received from consumers. Another one is to start conversations. So obviously, a key part of social media is the social part. And a lot of businesses I see create content, they post it, they schedule it, they work on it ahead of time, and then they kind of just leave it be. And that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that you can make. Because if you are not engaging, once your posts go up, if people are commenting, they are answering your questions, then again, the conversation stops there. You're limiting your engagement by not being reactive to your audience. So you want to constantly be engaging. You want to be responsive not only to your own comments, but to comments of other businesses in your industry. A lot of people who do social media day to day will either follow hashtags, they'll follow different industry partners, industry competitors, and they'll make sure that they spend a little bit of time every single day commenting and giving feedback, or at least monitoring what's happening. And so one of those strategies is called the $80 strategy. So basically that one, you follow 9 or 10 different hashtags and then 9 posts within that hashtag. So say that it was, hashtag recycle. You would go, you'd find 9 posts and you'd leave your 2 cents, right? And if you do that for 10 hashtags or 10 profiles, all of a sudden, you've done 90 comments and you're at $1.80, right? So you might not have time to do that much, but even just 10 a day. I mean, think about how much time you spend on social media, probably just aimlessly scrolling or sitting, on the couch at the end of the night watching Netflix, where you could probably be, spending a couple minutes just commenting and engaging. And then the other piece is to seek out user generated content. So you want to either find content that's relevant from your users. So that's if somebody tagged you or somebody used one of your hashtags. And by doing this, you would then repost it, you would give them a shout out. And again, what this does is it brings that social piece back into it. It's basically a community of sharing. And then another thing that's really important to talk about when it comes to engagement is trust and authenticity. So 50% of consumers think that less than half of brands create content that resonates as authentic. And again, that comes down to not knowing your audience, not talking to your audience as if you were talking to one person. The more personalized you can make it, the better. It comes down to not being honest and transparent. And then a lot of it also is, again, the too much pre-planning, too much pre-scheduling, and not enough commenting, connecting, and asking, does this bring value before you post something? When it comes to social media, it's usually better to focus on quality than it is to focus on quantity. I get asked all the time, how often should I be posting in a week? It depends. There's companies who post 3 times a day. There's companies that post 3 times a week. There's, some that post only once or twice a week. It depends whether the content that you're posting has value, because if it doesn't, what it's going to do is it's going to plummet your engagement rates. And then all of that effort will just be useless and you'll kind of be spinning your wheels. So that should say your challenge. Your social media challenge is to post a story today. So you've heard a couple different things that you could do, when you get back to the office tomorrow, but I challenge you to kind of get started now, right? We go to these conferences, we hear lots of ideas, and then most of the time, nothing really happens, right? So I challenge you to just get started today. So whether you, post a story talking about your day, something cool that you learned at this event, you could talk about something that you or your company stands for. Maybe how does that relate to the event today? And then if you do post something related to the event, use the hashtag MRRA or the hashtag Solid Waste Summit, because I'm curious to see when I go back to those hashtags tomorrow morning, how many people posted, and we'll kind of run a social experiment and see how many people took the challenge. So I know I have to wrap up. Shelby's telling me to finish up, but I wanted you to know that I've also added in here a couple bonuses, which are tools that you can use to make posting on social a little bit easier. So HubSpot has a free content calendar that you can download. It makes it really easy to plan posts. Canva is a free software where you can design your posts. And then there's lots of scheduling platforms. Planoly and Later are 2 really, really good ones that make it easy to schedule posts ahead of time. And then if you want more in-depth reporting than what some of the platforms offer, there's something called Dash This. So all of these are free except for the reporting. But most of the platforms themselves have pretty good reporting in and of themselves. So I think that the slides are going to be available and all of these links are clickable. And that's all I got. Sorry, I had to, sorry, I went fast. Oh. Uh-oh. There's one.
One for your challenge. Challenge. Okay, so we've run a little bit over because they ran a little bit over before. So it's about 3:35, I think. Is that right? I'm sure everybody's got something almost 3:40. So if there's any questions, Danny and Kate will be very able to take them, or we could say, we just want to wrap it up with a couple of questions or other comments. Are there any questions for anybody? Yeah, we do have 8 chats, and unfortunately, I have no idea how to answer those, but let's see if we can find them here. Don't have sound, don't have sound. That's what I thought they were. Yeah. Yeah, there's just no sound. Thank you, chatters. Yes, go ahead. So just for the folks at home, the question was, from a municipal standpoint, how can we convert this information to better represent not so much the personal touch, right? But the feeling of the company itself.
I think it's limiting a little bit, you know, for us. You know, you can try and make recycling, you know, a lot of this can be exciting, but you have to kind of be careful what you're putting up.
So I think you're 100% right? There's some businesses or organizations that are a little bit more difficult because it's not just, you know, it's really easy if you own a restaurant to constantly be, you know, posting specials and posting pictures of, you know, beautiful dishes, and everybody loves it, right? With something like a municipality, I would say, you know, maybe events that are happening within the community. So you can almost take it like one step further beyond what just the municipality would be letting people in the community know. And maybe you share some community events, you share, you know, nice things that are happening in your community. When I think of like a municipality that's doing a really good job, I think of the Bangor Police Department that has their Duck of Justice, and they're constantly share. If you haven't ever looked at the Bangor Police Department's Facebook page, you should take a look at it. They created this Duck of Justice, which is a wooden duck, and they post pictures with the duck like all over the city, or they'll share stories about some of the, you know, traffic stops that they did, some nice community things that happened, positive interactions with their police department. So it gives you kind of an idea to be able to tell stories that become a little bit more personal, or that read a little bit more personal, without necessarily giving away information that can't be given away, or having like one person or personality own it. Yeah.
All right, folks, thank you so very much for joining us today, all day, and for sticking around for our very last session. Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you, Danny. It's very impressive projects. We appreciate your participation. So thank you very much, folks. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.